Hello everyone and welcome to this career sector briefing for those exploring careers in public interest law. My name is David Ainscough and I'm one of the careers consultants with a particular focus on legal careers. Whilst we're on this introductory slide, I'll highlight the subheading in the title, which acts as a bit of a signpost to the way this session will progress, why it's of use, and what you can expect to take away from it. And that's the focus on what you should be doing now. It's a feature of the graduate legal labour marketplace that it appears dominated by the law firms in the corporate and commercial sector. They attract a great deal of attention and have the funds to promote themselves effectively in what is for them an extensively competitive marketplace. They have a clearly laid down timetable process they expect students to progress through. They support their candidates at every step with funding and advice. And they offer those wishing to apply many opportunities to connect with them to find out more. The experience of progressing within the public sector and public interest law can be very different. To state the obvious, there is much less in the way of funding accessible to students who have to take this into account as they support themselves more in the route to qualification. Flowing from this basic fact, students can expect the route to qualification to take longer as they manage the funds to navigate the subsequent steps. Students can expect to take more individual responsibility in planning their progression through acquiring work experience and taking on paralegaling roles, and they can expect to do a lot more networking as they uncover opportunities to prove themselves committed to the career and its stakeholders. All of which means starting to develop a clear focus is really important and easier to do now whilst you have the institutional framework around you of college, department, career service and alumni networks. In other words, knowing what you need to do now, and that's what I'll be covering. Moving on to a slide which encapsulates all of that, I'll try and help you to understand if the work is right for you and suggest many ways you can check that for yourself. This is not to be readily overlooked because you will be quizzed on this often to validate your own thinking of where you are and to convince others that you've thought this through and that you understand the demands of what can be a very frustrating and sometimes emotionally draining area of work. And with that in mind, there may well be moments when you need to remind yourself that you know this is an area of work that's right for you. Secondly, we'll review the scope of the roles and organisations populating the landscape of public interest law. There is a certain degree of fluidity open to you as you begin to understand more, and having qualified as either a solicitor or barrister, for example, in this sector, you can also choose between practice and other roles in other types of organisations. I wanted also to reflect in a little more detail on human rights work in particular. It unsurprisingly attracts a great deal of attention from students. It's work that can hit the headlines and can acquire a certain degree of celebrity status, as individual practitioners are given a very public voice and platform through the media. And it's work where you as an individual can have a real impact and make a significant difference to the lives of others in a way that can be that being part of a large transactional based commercial law team doesn't. But remember, along with all of that comes significant pressure and the possibility of burnout. And what I've just said is perhaps part of the reason why, despite all the downsides and difficulties in progressing towards your career goals, it's a career which is extremely competitive. The possibility of making a significant difference in the lives of those less fortunate is a very attractive career value and motivation, so the competition amongst students can be high. Finally, in the light of all I've said so far, knowing the key resources to use, the tools to help you improve, the information and insights available, and the support on offer to help you maintain your impetus is an important element of this briefing. So before launching into the detail, here are a set of criteria for evaluating what you'll be hearing about and how it's proving to be productive for you. Bear in mind your state of readiness to talk about your situation, describe your aspirations in a convincing way, and appear confident in the next steps you need to take. A big part of this is to evaluate your own profile as seen through the eyes of a recruiter and know whether or not it contains all those elements by which it will generate an impact, or whether you know there are gaps yet to fill. And then crucially beyond that, have a clearly formulated plan on which to proceed, which incorporates researching opportunities and uncovering new ones on an ongoing basis. Having a CV at the ready, which you review and update regularly, but which effectively expresses what needs to be known by a recruiter. You need to feel comfortable expressing your own motivational statements to be pursuing this area as a career. Students often find it difficult to express their motivations without sounding cliched, stereotypical, or otherwise uncomfortable. An easy way to overcome this is to contextualize your statements in the here and now. In other words, why is now the best time for you to be making an application? Why is now more interesting than before? And something perhaps associated with this perspective is a description of your experiences and activities during lockdown. Really reflect on how this period has influenced your interests and values, or perhaps develop your skills, and associate that with the career direction in which you now need to move as a result. Finally, use all the resources available to you, principally through the career service, but also probably on hand in your college and student societies, and check back regularly to update your knowledge. And I'm thinking here of the career service YouTube channel and things like Law Careers newsletters, and there are several of those, and keep up to date with what's happening in the sector. I mentioned earlier that the breadth of the career landscape open to students interested in areas of public legal work is extensive and to some extent quite fluid in careers terms, and this slide does two things to support that contention. Firstly, it offers up a definition to bear in mind, which essentially highlights that a large number of agencies which can sometimes, perhaps often, adversely affect the lives of individuals or citizens are subsequently held to account. And secondly, it identifies some of the organisations which occupy the landscape that you can aim to work in, and especially to the point, move between in a way that perhaps is more flexible than the private sector. So running through them now briefly, starting with specialised law firms. It's likely that an individual who is in need of legal advice and support may find themselves interacting initially with an individual duty solicitor, either via the police station duty solicitor scheme or the court duty solicitor scheme. But in either case, these are individuals who are in private practice specialising and accredited with this type of work. What attracts the career aspirations of students at this stage, however, is probably the more well-known leading high-profile law firms, of which there are quite a few, but just to name three by way of example, such as Binman's, Lee Day, and Bat Murphy. Such firms specialise in individual and collective actions such as public inquiries, immigration and migrant rights, women's rights, police misconduct, clinical negligence, court of protection cases, and so on. In order to work for one, you will need to demonstrate on your CV volunteering and paralegaling roles, perhaps a specialised LLM, and some capacity to have self-funded your LPC or SQE, whichever route you know are required to take. Alongside specialised law firms, typically you'll find the leading sets of chambers involved in civil liberties, human rights and public interest work. Again, there are many, but three by way of example you may know or heard of already would be Matrix Chambers, Doughty Street and Garden Court. To work with them, not only will you need to navigate your way through the qualification process to becoming a barrister and acquiring pupillage, which will require clear evidence of mooting, mini pupilages, and high academic ability and achievement, but you will need to show some connection to your constituents or future community of clients. And that's where, thirdly, the legal charities are so important. Fundamentally within the justice system, they serve to support those who otherwise might find their human rights and civil liberties infringed, or who have need of services and redress against the state and its related agencies. In the profiles of many practicing solicitors and barristers, you'll see a previous or continuing experience involving one of these as they continue to provide pro bono work in their professional careers. Do consider yourselves doing the same at some stage in your journey to becoming fully qualified. You'll discover that your law course provider will have connections with charities, and they will be suggesting the same to you in due course. And as a postscript, I've created a guide to legal charity volunteering, which you can find in the Handshake Resources Library under Graduate Digital Publications. Download it for yourself. Looking towards publicly funded bodies and roles, you'll principally come across the Crown Prosecution Service and Government Legal Department. The former is the body that determines whether those arrested and charged by the police should go on to face trial and will be responsible for assembling the case against them. The CPS is often a career route for qualified barristers who don't enter private practice. The GLD has a research, policy and advisory role supporting all other government departments as they frame new legislation or interpret existing ones. To work for the GLD, you can enter under one of their pupillage or trainee openings, but these are very few in number, and so you'll more typically have qualified elsewhere first. And finally, and lastly, for those wishing a role in the national or international stage, or in particular carrying out research outside academia, there are think tanks and NGOs which advertise their roles on their own websites and will require evidence of either further study, perhaps to PhD level, or significant field experience, sometimes in preference to a qualification to practice. At this point, and with this slide, it's worth highlighting that the work of the public bar, funded mainly as a result of the public purse and with the intended outcome of maintaining, supporting and developing the administration of the justice system, has seen a period of long-term attrition overlaid with some short-term challenges. To make sense of the impact of those and to demonstrate both to yourself and those assessing you that you are up to date and have an informed insight about issues of concern to all lawyers, the go-to place has now become The Secret Barrister. Starting life as a book, it's now grown to become a real-time information and knowledge dissemination service. Almost all those you may encounter along the process you'll be going through now will be aware of it and will consult it more or less frequently. And as you can see, as this slide shows, a book has now become a full digital and social media presence. Engage with it one way or another according to your preferences and highlight it as a source in some of your application and assessment answers to questions. As with any role in any organisation, especially one for which you are going to have to follow an application and assessment process, there are essentially three aspects of yourself that you need to evaluate and hopefully match to a specification for the role. And these are your skills, your interests, and your values. One way or another, you need to be clear about the relevance of each of those and to be able to articulate them impactfully. So for this slide, just a few pointers to help you reflect on how you can demonstrate each. Firstly, skills, and including strengths. Typically, this work provides for more levels of responsibility earlier than you'll find in a comparable commercial legal environment. The amount of work being dealt with compared to the number of resources makes it so, and therefore alongside such responsibility comes a premium on organisational skills. You'll be juggling a great many tasks, priorities and cases. And as a result of that, you'll develop very strong communication skills to deal with the multiplicity of stakeholders you'll encounter, which in addition to your clients may include government agencies, the judicial system, and when dealing with clients, may include multiple agencies covering multiple issues and multiple challenges. At this stage of your life, and with this career aspiration in mind, you will, I anticipate, have demonstrated an interest in the area of work already. You'll have been drawn to social welfare or issues relevant to the justice system and the community in your personal activities. You'll probably also be someone who is following the relevant news both broadly or for a certain series of topics that you feel very strongly about. And you'll gravitate towards the leader columns in the broadsheet press or read specialist weekly periodicals. And within Cambridge, you may have a role within a society or committee which allows you to channel your interests for the benefit of others. And to values, perhaps the strongest connector of all to this area of work. An ethos of serving the public will need to be strong, especially so when being considered for roles within the GLD. But a desire to protect the disadvantaged and vulnerable members of society is paramount in any role in which you find yourself advocating on their behalf. And one value you will be clear about is that accepting that monetary rewards are lower compared to anything else requiring a comparable level of work. The hours can be long and the work itself intense. And so to human rights work. It can at times appear glamorous because of its public exposure. Successful cases can be high profile and featured in leading news items, with lawyers seen speaking to camera on the pavement outside the Royal Courts of Justice. But placing in our context of skills and strengths and interests and values, the level of personal resiliency required is extremely high. You'll need to temper what might be an evident passion within you with a great deal of patience, and you'll frequently be advocating with either a small or large a on behalf of clients on the topic you find yourself responsible for. And there is a significant downside of burnout. If the work is emotionally draining, you will only be able to take so much of it, however high your threshold, before it can take its toll, unless you develop some conscious and effective coping mechanisms. Be aware of how you deal with that and be prepared to articulate it when put on the spot and asked. All of which can sound informative, but perhaps abstract or disconnected from reality. So don't listen just to my observations. Watch and listen to 3 of our graduates who are practitioners. I've recorded conversations with each of them and they're available on our Career Service YouTube channels, so go find them. They're invaluable not only in hearing about the work in real detail, but also as a way to evaluate the strengths of your current profile against those who from your stage went on to succeed in a path you are perhaps thinking of following. So by way of brief introduction, there are videos from Taiba Bajwa, who is a barrister with Doughty Street, Amy O'Shea, who works as a paralegal with the human rights law firm Vinmans, and Alex Diner, who is a trainee solicitor with Bat Murphy, and amongst other things is part of the ongoing Grenfell Tower inquiry. So by now you'll have gathered that developing a career in public law is as competitive as any other, and the following 2 slides will hopefully help you make the most of your chances of succeeding. At a basic level, you will need to present yourself effectively to an audience, and using a CV and good cover letter is most likely to be the route taken to do that, rather than an application form. So to make a start, Check out the templates and suggestions in our CV guide, and having put one together yourself or improved an existing one, take it to the next level and analyse its potential impact by putting it through our relatively new career set tool to generate and improve an impact score from your material. You'll find both of these resources and many more on the resource library accessed from within Handshake. And with this slide, a final comparison with the private sectors where open days, insight weeks and VAC schemes are on offer within a wide range of firms. Here are a few words about gathering one or more examples of work experience relevant to this form of work in the public sector. Obviously, for those looking towards the bar, it will be mini pupilages. And to answer a question I'm often asked, it's okay to do as many minis as you can, as you don't need to cite all of them on your CV and look as though you've been uncertain in your choice of career direction. Simply select those most relevant. Secondly, speculative applications to a whole range of specialised law firms local to you and where you live is perfectly acceptable. They may specialise in immigration or medical negligence and might be based on your nearest high street with a staff of less than double figures. Just ask them for something appropriate to do and they will figure out the job title for the work they think you can help with. Thirdly, and to say it again, the many legal charities supporting individuals and their access to justice are a large and vital part of this legal landscape. As I said, I've produced a guide to volunteering in one of these, and I list about 50 of them in the guide, which is in the Handshake resource library. They might sound difficult to approach, but the opposite is true. So although they lack a flashy website interface to connect with, they couldn't continue to function without volunteers, and so will welcome a steady stream of offers. And once experienced, you can continue your connection with them throughout the rest of your career. Check out the guide and see the rich variety of practical and impactful activities on offer. Public law bodies are a bit like charities as a source of great opportunities to get involved in the grassroots functioning of justice and to support the community. In particular, the system of youth justice and its associated support infrastructure can be connected with via the website of your local police and crime commissioner, where you'll see lots of opportunities detailed in which to get involved as a volunteer. And don't forget the transferable skills and knowledge you can acquire in almost any sector of public work experience. So with this penultimate slide, I wanted to highlight and reinforce several key learning outcomes from this session. Firstly, relevant work experience counts for a lot. You have to be able to convince others that you know what you're letting yourself in for. Next, you need to invest your own time, willingly chosen to volunteer for extracurricular activities which count and which sustain the argument that your interest in this area of work is also sustained by your own personal values. Thirdly and fourthly, be prepared to have to fund part of your qualification, your process yourself. There is an absence of sponsorship and scholarships on which you can rely. The next learning outcomes you'll have realised by now is that all of this amounts to having face validity in your own career direction. In other words, you look and sound the part you are in effect auditioning for when you meet with interviewers and assessors. And that's reflected in the motivational statements you make appearing credible, backed up as they will be with tangible evidence. And as with anything this risky as a career direction, think what your own plan B will be if it all proves to be too difficult. And final word, final slide. Check out the website of the Chair of the Faculty of Law here at Cambridge, Professor Mark Elliott. His resources from guides to blogs tweets and websites, including very much his own, are excellently informative and brilliantly accessible. It's a knowledge resource on your doorstep, so please don't overlook it. www.publiclawforeveryone.com. And that's the end of this briefing session, which I hope has been useful and informative and has provided you with at least one activity to engage with, and hopefully more than one. Thanks for listening.